everybody, I'm Bill Sanders, and this is WatchArtSci, the art and science of watch collection. Today, we're going to take a look at Ben's collection for the wise and frugal collector. And to get started, we're going to take a look at the first watch is the Seiko Sarb 033, 6R15 caliber. This watch is just a great entry level to horology, to strong horology, and it reminds me something of like a good solid Rolex Datejust. Those it's very similar kind of watch. It's got a good but not horribly exciting movement. It's just a good solid movement. It's just a good watch, and I like it a lot. Now, the second one is a Vostok Amphibia. And this is a cheap watch. It's like $100, but I really like it. It's a diver, and if you're going to go diving, and you're worried about your watch, this is one to take with you. I mean, if you're worried about your shark biting your arm off, you'd have to buy a new watch. This one, it's only $99 or something like that. But I just like the looks of it. A little orange watch. You take that thing diving away and having a good time with it, not worry about it. The next one is the Orion 1 Blue. This is also a Russian watch. It's made in Moscow. Most of the parts are from Hong Kong, but the movement, it's got a good movement. It's got a Seiko NH35 in it. So it's a good looking watch. I like it. It's it is a bit Bauhaus in the sense it's a nice, plain, good looking watch. I like it though. And so you got two Russian watches and two Seikos together in Ben's collection so far. Okay, now this next one, the first one, the 1980 birth year Vostok, is a again, it's a good everyday, just plain watch. Nothing too exciting about it. There's nothing about the horology that is going to shake up the world. But it's just sort of a good plain watch. Now, to me, where things really got interesting are with these three Raketas. They too are Russian, but the history is really a very interesting one. The Raketas are made in what's called the Petrovorets watch factory, and it's a 300-year-old factory that was founded by Peter the Great in 1721. And so we're dealing with watches. Perhaps, obviously, there's not going to be a complete family line from Peter the Great, especially through his family that didn't make it through the Russian Revolution. But let's take a look at what they have here. First of all, there's a 1985 eggshell. And again, this is just a nice, good-looking, I think, a very attractive, everyday kind of watch. The Patek, or Raketa, I get it wrong, probably. This is a world timer. And it's a great kind of watch to travel with. You can, just sort of keep an eye on where you are. You're going to have to learn a little Cyrillic because all of the different cities around the world are in Russian, but that's okay. And it's not expensive. These watches are very reasonably priced. I think they go from maybe $200 brand new up to right around $1,000. That's the most you're going to pay for one of these watches. And on the used market, they are really a bargain. The next one after the World Time is the Patek Big Zero, which I sort of like, well, what's your watch? Well, it's the Big Zero. Hey, listen, when you get a little older and your eyesight isn't quite what it used to be, that Big Zero could come in handy. All right, now the final set of watches that Ben has, there's first of all is a Longines 6942, and it's just a nice dress watch. or an everyday watch. It's just sort of just a nice one. I mean, there's nothing cruddy about it. All of those watches are very clean looking. The Oris Aquas Date is a nice little diver, and I really like the black and gray combination with the I don't know if it's exactly white or not, but the date markers and the hands have a sort of a light color, perhaps a little green lumina in there, and it's a good looking watch. I mean, it's these are not sky high horology, but that's okay. They're nice watches. One of the things that gets me is that sometimes you'll see these characters, they'll put a little barfy emoji or something with some watch that's not up to their standards. Yet they got an Omega or IWC and it's got an ETA in it, or a Stellita, and they don't even know that. They're making fun of somebody else's watches. That's not a good idea. I mean, these are interesting watches, and the more you learn about it, I think the better off you're going to be. Okay, now the last watch to me is very interesting. It's called the Favre-Leuba Sea Chief. And what happened with this particular brand? The Favre-Leuba, right now they're in Zug, Switzerland, which is, I don't think any other watch manufacturers are there. They started off in a town that was between Geneva and Basel. In fact, it was just up the road from Besançon, France. And they trace theirs back to 1737 when Abraham Favre was registered as a watchmaker. So that's what they put their starting point as, is 1737. Okay, so they had a long Swiss history of making watches, and they really hit their high point in the 60s, which is sort of the last hurrah before everyone got wiped out by the quartz watches. But they really developed some interesting things. They had a twin barrel that they introduced for 50-hour wind on your watch, a power reserve of 50 hours. And on Ben's seat sheet, it's got, and you can see it in the caliber, the 253 dual barrel. Now that was from 1962. Now what they also did in 1962 that I just thought was great was a watch they called the Bivouac. And what it had an altimeter, a mechanical watch with an altimeter. No one had ever done that before. Had an altimeter barometer in a wristwatch. Mechanical. I mean, it would, you could see a smartwatch. They'll do everything. Tell you who's going to win the World Cup. But mechanical ones, this was a big deal. They also, in 1960, they developed one of the first dive watches for deep water. So it's one of those companies that were here and then they disappeared. Now, if you go looking for Favre-Leuba watches online and looking for the mechanical ones, you can find them for like $50 or so at places like Chrono 24. And, so, that's really good. But one of the things you'll notice is that they're being sold from somebody who lives in India. Now, one of the reasons for that is that I think it was 2011, the company was bought by the Tata Group, or actually it was called, it was one of the ones that the Tata Group owned. The Tata Group is an Indian conglomerate who also owned Jaguar and Land Rover, or Range Rover, which are pretty impressive. And so the Titan Group, they bought them in 2011. But they kept the name. And apparently, I think they kept some of the stock too, because you see a lot of these watches from the 60s coming out of India. And I guess that's where they got them. I'm not sure. So anyway, between 2011 and 2016, not a lot seemed to happen. But then in 2016, they came out with a watch that had already been there, called the Harpoon. And then this year, just in last month, I think, in BaselWorld, or maybe it was this month. In BaselWorld 2017, the brand was celebrating its 280th anniversary, and they had the unveiling of a new bivouac, and it was called the Bivouac 9000. Now this was for 9,000 meters, which is high as Mount Everest. 9,000 meters, or about 27,000 feet. And it just blew my mind. Again, as a former pilot, I love the idea of having an altimeter. I don't fly anymore, but it'd be fun to have one. Great looking watch, and so maybe Favre-Leuba will be back doing some interesting things. All of their mechanical movements are in house. They did make some quartz watches like everyone else, but they are strictly in-house, and they make them in this town called Zug. I think the entire canton of Zug is about the population of my little town that I live in, around 20, 30,000. It's not very big. But I don't know why they ended up in Zug, but that was where they decided to make them. Anyhow, well, that's Ben's collection, and I think it's a wonderful collection. It's very, very interesting. Um, Now, I usually have some kind of suggestion, and it's sort of like every collection, I think, at some point needs to sneak into the high horology, and there are a lot of different ways you can do it. I mean, my first high horology watch was a pre-owned watch, and I think that's sort of the way to go when, because these things get crazy expensive. And a couple watches, in my opinion, that are high horology and very much undervalued are, first of all, is the Girard-Perregaux. I did a video on that. I think it's one of the big secrets for at reasonable prices. You can get a good one. And they've been winning. They won a ton of Grand Prix awards, including the Aiguille d'Or, which is the highest award you can get. I don't know why did everyone's used Girard-Perregaux from my Harry Winston to my overseas to a lot of other brands have used Girard-Perregaux, but I don't know why they're not as popular as they should be. Well, they're not as costly. So you can find, you might find one. Another brand, same thing, is Jaeger-LeCoultre. Now, of course, you hear about the Reverso almost ad nauseum, and I love Reverso. I have one. My wife has one. But take a look at something that is in high horology, or even what I do. I try to find a watch that's got some high horology in it, like my Harry Winston. It was a big surprise. So anyway, that would be if you want to just sort of poke your nose up into the next level. I think that might be something that would be a lot of fun too. I think you have a very interesting collection, and I think the history of it is fantastic. And I think the rest of collectors, especially if you're on a very limited budget, there's a lot of interesting things you can do. And I think Ben's example is a perfect example of how you can have things that are horologically very interesting, and including some really solid ones like that, like the Seiko. It's a good, strong horological piece to have. And anyway, I'd like to thank Ben again for sending in all of these really interesting, and to me it was a huge education learning about all of these different watches. The Russian watches, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff going on there. So anyhow, so again, if you have comments, please leave comments. I'd love to hear your comments, and I'm sure Ben would too. Maybe you have some great ideas for Ben as well. And if you'd like to subscribe, this is an invitation. You're more than welcome to subscribe. We'd love to have you. Okay, see you next Friday. This has been Bill Sanders for WatchArtSci, the Art of Science.